Hi there, my name is Benedetta and welcome to Tender is the Read. I hope you're doing well. I hope that you're having a lovely summer. And in this video, I want to talk to you all about one of the hottest genre at the minute, which is of course mythology retellings. These books are always super popular, and if you're looking for reads for the summer, I'm sure you will have noticed that a lot of bookstores these days have entire tables and sections dedicated to it. So because it is a genre that I read a lot and I genuinely love and find super entertaining, I have put together a few recommendations for some mythology retellings that I particularly appreciate, and especially if you're new to the genre, I would recommend to you. So for the sake of variety, the way I have gone about this selection is to take original myths and select only one retelling for each of them. So this is of course a very short list. I only selected 5 titles just to make things nice and simple. Usual reminder, one of my earliest videos on my channel is all about all the mythology retellings that I've read, so you can get a full breakdown and my thoughts on about 20-ish different mythology retellings, and you can see through my monthly wrap-ups as well that I mention and discuss loads of them. So this is just meant to be a place to start, or you know, just a little showcase that is not too boring or too long or anything. Before we jump in, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new video. So first things first, my pick for a retelling of the Iliad is the Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Yes, of course, this is probably the OG retelling that has sparked the renaissance of this genre and has made it more popular than ever. So of course you've heard about this, you've seen it at your local bookstore, you've seen the special 10-year anniversary edition probably, and you've seen it everywhere online. It's a viral book talk and bookstagram title, but I think that is with extremely good merit. This book retells sort of the events of the Trojan War and a little bit before and after through the eyes of Patroclus, which is one of the most famous characters from the epic poem, I would say, and of course his relationship with Achilles. I really appreciate Madeline Miller's vision, and especially her lyrical writing and beautiful prose just really enhance the story and make for a convincing version of the myth, in my opinion. It's also an extremely compelling and heartbreaking story, but in the best possible way. It's really a book that will keep you hooked. And yeah, I just can't praise this book enough. It is really worth all the hype, and so I would recommend you pick it up. It's also got summer vibes because of course, you know, Achilles is the son of a sea nymph, so I think this is perfect for a good sort of sad summer read. So just to get it out of the way, my second pick is Madeline Miller's second novel, which is Circe. So you could class this as an Odyssey retelling, I would say, because of course Circe is most prominently featured in the Homeric poem, but at the same time she's a character who sort of cameos in various stories of heroes and gods as well. So Madeline Miller, what she does here is to take every opportunity to weave together all these different narratives, taking into consideration all the family connections and relations that have to do with Circe, and it makes for such an entertaining book. This is my favorite myth retelling of all time, and I've said it before because of the fact that it features so much lore, and most of it is accurate and is given a lot more dimension that you could ever find in the original sources, so that is absolutely beautiful. Again, the writing very easy to follow, flows beautifully, very lyrical, sort of reminiscent of the poems themselves. And I particularly enjoy the perspective of an immortal as our protagonist, because the story takes place over centuries and she encounters everybody from titans like Prometheus to the Olympians, and then of course she encounters a number of heroes from different eras, different generations, like Jason and Medea, and then several centuries later Odysseus as per the Odyssey, of course. It's just so beautiful. It's extremely rich. I would definitely recommend this. It's so great. Okay, so another famous epic poem from Greek mythology is the Orgonautica, or Jason and the Golden Fleece by Apollodorus of Rhodes. For that particular myth, I've actually picked a bit of a out of a left field choice, but it's actually Atalanta by Jennifer Saint. So of course this book is not strictly a retelling of the Jason myth, it's in fact a retelling of the Atalanta myth, and she is the most famous female hero in Greek mythology, and she already has a pretty rich story. Now, she appears in the Orgonautica when she volunteers to join the crew to go search for the Golden Fleece. However, in that poem, she gets rejected because of the fact that she's a woman and she can only give them some sort of spear or some token of her presence. But of course, women weren't allowed on ships back in the day for superstitious reasons. But this book twists the myth or the poem by saying that the way the story is remembered is actually just what the men claimed, but instead Atalanta was indeed able to board the ship. And so through that we see her journey with this really eclectic and fabulous really group of heroes. Of course, there's Jason, who's always a super fun character to explore, as well as Heracles, Orpheus, Meleager, Castor and Pollux. I mean, there's loads of different heroes that get represented in this book, but of course our focal point is Atalanta, and she really gets to shine from her beginnings as a baby saved by the goddess Artemis and this privileged relationship that she has with the goddess, and then eventually the way that she participates in all of these quests with all these different heroes. It's just all portrayed so beautifully in a way that once again lets us get a closer look to the myth and expand relationships and dynamics in a way that is not present in the original sources. It really made for a compelling narrative and a fun story to read, so I would definitely recommend you pick this up. So the next retelling I have is one that is extremely underrated in my opinion, and I'm talking about The Queens of Themyscira by Hannah Lynn, which is all about the Amazons. So the Amazons are a group of women warriors that I think are pretty famous in terms of characters from Greek mythology. In pop culture, like Wonder Woman is an Amazon, and in general I feel like they are famous figures, but more as a name drop kind of thing and not so much the myths in which they appear. Partially the problem is that their main poems and cycles in which they would have appeared have been lost to us, so there's an entire book in the Trojan War cycle that would have been focused on the Amazons and when they intervene in the war. Those are very important episodes that we see, for example, represented in Greek art, but we don't have a book that talks about that episode per se. We only have fragments. What this book does is it combines the episodes of the Amazons that we are aware of and creates a narrative in which not only they all make sense chronologically, but they also make for really interesting and compelling characters. Our main protagonists are the two main Amazon queens that get mentioned in Greek mythology, which are Hippolyte and Penthesilea. So Hippolyte, for example, appears in the myth of Heracles and the myth of Theseus, and Penthesilea, as I said, is part of the Trojan War. But the way these two stories are weaved together, with them being sisters and with Hippolyte sort of journeying into the world of men, is quite interesting. The fact that Hannah Lynn manages to make them all chronologically make sense, considering that the timelines are often overlapping and contradictory. For me, it was so exciting. But even if you've never heard of these stories, you will enjoy this because the stories themselves are fascinating and the characters are made so real in this and given so much dimension and soul. Ultimately, it's a bit of a tragic story because some of the sources are actual Greek tragedies, so that it's not super surprising there. But nevertheless, it is an amazing addition to the mythology retelling canon. And if you're looking for something that is not one of the obvious myths and still features some quite important characters from mythology, I would really recommend this one. And speaking of sort of unusual characters from Greek mythology, the last pick that I have here is a brand new book, and I'm talking about Psyche and Eros by Luna McNamara. This book is a retelling of the fable of Eros and Psyche, or Love and Psyche. And it's about the god of love, Eros, and how he sort of falls in love with this girl by accident by pricking himself with one of his arrows. But unfortunately, this particular arrow is cursed, and so these two lovers are destined to be separated if Psyche gets a glimpse of Eros' face. This leads to a lot of hijinks. This is a much more light mythology retelling. This story from mythology is always reminded me of a fairy tale. Like, it's got elements of the Beauty and the Beast, Rumpelstiltskin in a way. If you read this and you're aware of those fairy tales, you will definitely see the parallels. But what this retelling does is taking the damsel in distress character of Psyche and making her a much more complete person. And in fact, she is a Spartan princess, and so she's trained in the ways of warfare. She is much more adventurous and independent, and she doesn't love the fact that she is suddenly kidnapped by this god, although of course she is allowed to live in luxury. She is headstrong and ultimately fights to get what she wants. And in the meantime, it's funny to see this dynamic with Eros, who's of course a god and doesn't impress her much. So it's fun in a sort of rom-com type of way, but also it has depth. And I think that a lot of that depth is also added by Eros himself, who is a character that we follow from his archaic origin at the beginning of time. And through him we see sort of the changes that occur to the hierarchy of titans and gods with the Olympians, etc. So it's quite entertaining from different point of views. It features a lot of characters that perhaps you wouldn't expect in this type of story, but I think it's kind of clever how it introduces them and connects them to the story, which is otherwise quite isolated from the rest of the lore, the rest of the heroes or the Homeric characters. And then finally, it also features a lot of gods, including minor ones like Hecate, and then Demeter or Persephone, and of course Aphrodite. For me, it had elements of what I liked about Circe with the immortal point of view. Yeah, this is super entertaining, and it's a light one if you want something that is a little bit less tragic for your summer read at the beach. So for today, that is all. I have just selected 5 books for a really easy guide to the mythology retellings that I would recommend. Of course, I've read so many more, and I actually loved a lot others as well, but I thought this was a good mix of sort of well-known myths and lesser-known ones retold in modern form. And I would actually really like to hear which ones you read and which ones you would recommend. And if you want to see more, let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, once again, please don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!